Good evening. Tonight on World News, Defiance, Crackdown, and a regime under strain. From a powerful new symbol of protest led by Iranian women to deadly force on the streets of Tehran, and a direct appeal to Washington from Iran's exiled royal heir. Let's begin in Iran. A striking new form of protest is spreading across Iran and across the global internet. Viral videos show Iranian women lighting cigarettes by burning photographs of the country's supreme leader. A deliberate public act of defiance against political and religious authority, needless to say. It is shared widely on X, Instagram, Telegram, and Reddit. The trend has become impossible to ignore and increasingly difficult for the Iranian state to contain. Khamenei must be making a different plan now. Let's take a closer look.
A single flame, a single photograph, and a message that is now circling the world. Iranian women are lighting cigarettes by burning the image of their supreme leader, and it is becoming one of the boldest protest symbols Iran has seen in years. Across social media, new videos are going viral. They show women calmly setting fire to photographs of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, then using that flame to light a cigarette. The act is deliberate, slow, and unmistakably defiant. In Iran, burning the supreme leader's image is considered a serious crime. For women, smoking in public has long been restricted, discouraged, or socially punished. By combining both acts, these women are rejecting political authority, religious control, and strict social rules in one powerful gesture. The trend is spreading fast on platforms like X, Instagram, Reddit, and Telegram. Each clip is shared thousands of times, turning individual acts of resistance into a global digital movement. Even with censorship and surveillance, the videos keep reappearing. This wave of defiance comes as Iran faces growing economic pain. Inflation is soaring, the currency is collapsing, food prices are rising, public anger is boiling over, and protests are once again flaring up in cities across the country. After the 2022 death of Mahsa Amini, millions poured into the streets. Those protests were violently crushed. Now, resistance is changing shape, shifting from large demonstrations to symbolic acts that spread instantly and cannot be easily silenced. As unrest grows, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has delivered a fiery warning. He accused protesters of serving foreign enemies and insisted the Islamic Republic will not retreat. He even warned U.S. President Donald Trump that tyrants always fall, a message meant to project strength at home.
It does not tolerate the act of being a mercenary for foreigners.
You can be anyone you want to be, but once you became a foreign mercenary, you started working for outsiders.
The nation considers you completely unacceptable. The Islamic regime also considers you completely unacceptable.
This situation, it is directly connected to these specific individuals. That particular fellow, the one who carries himself with such an air of arrogance and overwhelming pride.
He sits there passing judgment on the entire world. He should also be well aware that typically the most tyrannical despots and arrogant oppressors throughout history, from the likes of Pharaoh, Nimrod, Reza Khan, Mohammad Reza, and countless others of their kind, were ultimately overthrown and brought down from power precisely when they believed themselves to be at the absolute pinnacle of their pride and unyielding arrogance. This one too is going to be overthrown.
But the viral videos tell another story. They show fear giving way to boldness. They show women reclaiming control, one small flame at a time. In a country where words can be dangerous, symbols have become louder than speeches. And right now, Iranian women are using fire to make themselves impossible to ignore.
So the videos of burning images of the supreme leader Khamenei to light a cigarette have spread rapidly across all platforms, as we mentioned, amplifying voices that the state has long tried to suppress. This surge of defiance comes amid worsening economic hardship, renewed protests, and long-standing anger over women's rights. Pressures now colliding once again. Take a look at the backstory of this trend.
What do women in Iran, lighting cigarettes with photos of Supreme Leader Khamenei and massive street protests, have in common? The answer might redefine how we see dissent in Iran today. In the streets of Tehran and cities across Iran, protests that began in late December have grown into one of the biggest challenges to the clerical system, which has held power since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. And now, powerful images are going viral online, showing Iranian women lighting cigarettes using burned photographs of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and even discarding their headscarves into flames. These acts are not just symbolic, they're deliberate and dangerous. Under Iranian law, burning the Supreme Leader's photo is a serious crime. And for women to smoke openly, defying strict dress codes and social norms, adds a second layer of rebellion. By combining these two acts, protesters are challenging not only state authority, but also decades of strict social restrictions, pushing back against rules that govern even the smallest personal freedoms. The protests began over soaring food prices and record-high inflation, but have now evolved into a broader anti-government movement and a clear signal that many Iranians are no longer willing to stay silent. The response from authorities has been harsh. Reports suggest at least 217 protesters have died, mostly from live ammunition, according to hospitals in Tehran, and the government has cut internet access and telephone lines, effectively isolating the country to suppress the protests. Despite this, defiance continues. In northern Tehran, residents bang pots and shout slogans mocking the supreme leader, while passing cars honk in solidarity with the demonstrators. In his first public remarks on the unrest, Khamenei called the protesters vandals and saboteurs, while U.S. President Donald Trump warned that Iran's leadership could be in big trouble and hinted at potential military action. Meanwhile, international leaders from France, Germany, and the UK have condemned the killings and urged restraint, highlighting the growing global concern over Iran's escalating crisis. These iconic images, women burning Khamenei's photos, discarding their hijabs, lighting cigarettes, have become more than just a viral sensation. They are a visual representation of a larger movement, a movement demanding freedom, accountability, and change in a country where dissent has long been dangerous. And as Iran continues to wrestle with this unprecedented wave of protest, the world is watching.
So protests across Iran swelled dramatically, and in many areas the regime responded with gunfire. Medical sources in Tehran have reported over 200 deaths in just days, more caused by live ammunition. At the same time, Iran imposed a near-total communication blackout, cutting internet and phone services, a familiar tactic ahead of large-scale crackdowns. Here's the ground report from the streets of Tehran.
Reports claim that more than 200 protesters have died in Tehran alone as anti-regime unrest sweeps Iran. As of January 10, 2026, Iran is facing one of the most intense waves of protests in decades. What began in late December over economic hardship, plummeting currency values, soaring inflation, and rising costs of living has quickly escalated into nationwide calls for regime change. Demonstrators are no longer just demanding economic relief. Crowds across all 31 provinces, from Tehran to Mashhad, Isfahan, Tabriz, and Shiraz, are openly challenging Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Chants of death to the dictator have been heard alongside calls for the return of exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. Strikes and marches are widespread. Bazaar merchants started the action, but now hundreds of thousands are occupying major roads, blocking highways, and engaging in acts of defiance. Videos emerging from Tehran show fires consuming vehicles, government buildings, and even mosques, including the Al Rasul Mosque in Sadat Abad. The government response has been swift and severe. A nationwide internet blackout began around January 8th through 9th, cutting off communications and slowing the flow of information. Security forces have deployed tear gas and live ammunition against protesters. Casualty reports vary widely. Human rights groups cite at least 45 to 65 deaths since late December, including children. But an anonymous Tehran doctor told Time that at least 217 people have been killed into 6 hospitals across the capital, most from live ammunition. Official Iranian sources, however, deny such high numbers. Thousands have been arrested, and reports indicate that foreign militias, including Iraqi Shia groups, may have been deployed to aid the crackdown. International reactions are heating up. On January 9th, U.S. President Donald Trump warned Iran that the U.S. is watching closely and that violent repression of protesters could provoke direct action.
So Iran's in big trouble. It looks to me that the people are taking over certain cities that nobody thought were really possible just a few weeks ago. We're watching the situation very carefully. I've made the statement very strongly that if they start killing people like they have in the past, we will get involved. We'll be hitting them very hard where it hurts. And that doesn't mean boots on the ground, but it means hitting them very, very hard where it hurts. So,
in response, Supreme Leader Khamenei called the demonstrators vandals and saboteurs, framing the unrest as a foreign-instigated plot. He vowed that the regime will not tolerate mercenaries working in the interests of foreigners and promised decisive punishment. Iran has also lodged formal protests with the United Nations, condemning Trump's statements as unlawful and warning that the U.S. bears responsibility for any escalation. Despite violent crackdowns, protests continue into January 10th, with opposition forces claiming defiance even in regime strongholds like Mashhad. This wave of unrest marks the most serious challenge to the Islamic Republic in years, echoing past movements like the 2022 Women Life Freedom protests.
Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of Iran's last Shah, has issued an urgent appeal to the United States president. In a public message, he warned that protesters are facing live fire and total isolation. No internet, no landlines, no way to communicate with the outside world. Pahlavi called for immediate international action, saying millions of Iranians are risking their lives for change while the regime tightens its grip. Take a look.
Iran is erupting once again, streets ablaze, tens of thousands protesting, and a nation gripped by fear and anger. But now, a dramatic plea from abroad has captured the world's attention. Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of Iran's late Shah, has directly called on U.S. President Donald Trump to intervene, and his message is urgent. On social media, he wrote, quote, "Mr. President, this is an urgent and immediate call for your attention, support, and action." End quote. Pahlavi highlighted 2 urgent crises: a nationwide internet blackout that has cut Iranians off from the world, and the growing threat of force against peaceful demonstrators. He urged citizens to mobilize in overwhelming numbers. This plea comes against the backdrop of Trump's prior threats, including military action if Iran's security forces harm protesters, and the past year's strikes on Iranian nuclear sites in coordination with Israel. Pahlavi is essentially asking the U.S. to step in, now, before the regime can crush the uprising.
My fellow citizens, bravo to every single one of you who on Thursday night took to the streets across our entire nation. I am so proud of all of you. It became evident to many of you that with a massive turnout of people, the forces of suppression are pushed back and you can minimize the possibility of any crackdown. For those of you who had doubts, be with your fellow citizens this Friday night. I call upon the field leaders to make an effort for the mobilized crowds to reach each other so that the numbers grow even larger. I know they have cut off the internet and communications. Despite these desperate attempts by the regime, I know that you will not abandon the streets. Be certain that victory belongs to you.
While the exact level of support for Pahlavi inside Iran is unclear, his name has echoed across demonstrations, signaling a potential shift in public sentiment. He has also declared his readiness to lead a transitional government if the Islamic Republic falls, envisioning a democratic future for Iran after decades of authoritarian rule. The protests, the largest since 2022, reflect a nation on the brink. Millions are fed up with economic hardship, censorship, and repression. And now, with Pahlavi's urgent call to Trump, the international spotlight is sharper than ever. Will the world intervene, or will the regime's iron grip tighten even further? Time is running out for the people of Iran, and one question hangs over it all. Could this exiled prince's plea change the course of history?
It does not tolerate the act of being a mercenary for foreigners.
You can be anyone you want to be, but once you became a foreign mercenary, you started working for outsiders.
The nation considers you completely unacceptable. The Islamic regime also considers you completely unacceptable.
This situation, it is directly connected to these specific individuals. That particular fellow, the one who carries himself with such an air of arrogance and overwhelming pride,
He sits there passing judgment on the entire world. He should also be well aware that typically the most tyrannical despots and arrogant oppressors throughout history, from the likes of Pharaoh, Nimrod, Reza Khan, Mohammad Reza, and countless others of their kind, were ultimately overthrown and brought down from power precisely when they believed themselves to be at the absolute pinnacle of their pride and unyielding arrogance. This one too is going to be overthrown.
Iran tonight stands at a dangerous crossroads. A generation is speaking through symbols, streets, and sacrifice, and a regime is responding with force, fear, and silence. The question now is whether the world is merely watching or preparing to respond. That's all for World News Tonight. Goodbye for now. Stay informed.